Picture this scenario. You're scrolling through social media at 2 in the morning, and you see your college roommate posting photos from their third vacation this year. Your coworker just bought a house that makes your apartment look like a closet. Your neighbor is driving a car that costs more than you make in 2 years. And you're sitting there wondering what you're missing. What secret level of wealth are these people operating on that you haven't unlocked yet? My name is Keith, and I spend way too much time thinking about money, wealth psychology, and why some people seem to effortlessly climb the financial ladder while others get stuck spinning their wheels at the same level for decades. If you've ever wondered what the actual levels of wealth look like, and more importantly, which level you're currently stuck on, and how to break through to the next one, make sure to hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up if it helps you see your financial situation more clearly. Here's something that might surprise you. Wealth isn't a smooth climb from zero to billionaire. It's more like a video game with distinct levels, each with its own rules, challenges, and psychological barriers. Most people think wealth building is linear, that you just keep adding money to your bank account until somehow you're rich. But that's not how it actually works. There are specific thresholds that act like invisible walls between different levels of financial existence. And here's the kicker. Most people get trapped at level 2 for their entire lives without even realizing there are 5 more levels above them. The tragic part is that breakthrough to the next level often requires a completely different mindset, not just more money. You can't think your way to level 4 using level 2 strategies. It's like trying to beat a boss in a video game using weapons from 3 levels ago. Technically possible, but you're making it exponentially harder than it needs to be. So today, we're going to break down all 7 levels of wealth, figure out where you currently sit, and more importantly, understand what it actually takes to level up. Before we dive into the levels themselves, let me share something that will probably blow your mind. The average American household has a net worth of about $121,000. Sounds pretty good, right? But here's the catch. That number is heavily skewed by the ultra-wealthy. The median household net worth, which is a much better representation of where most people actually sit, is only about $68,000. And when you remove home equity from that calculation, most Americans have less than $20,000 in actual liquid wealth. Think about that for a second. Most people are living their entire financial lives within just the first 2 or 3 levels of wealth, never even getting close to the levels where money starts working harder than they do. Let's start with level 1, which I call survival mode. This is where you're living paycheck to paycheck, constantly worried about unexpected expenses, and every financial decision feels like it could make or break your month. You know you're at level 1 when a $500 emergency would require you to put something on a credit card, borrow money, or sacrifice something essential like groceries or rent. But here's what's interesting about level 1 that most people don't understand. You might think the biggest challenge is simply not having enough money, but the real trap is that your brain becomes completely consumed with short-term survival. When you're worried about making rent next week, you can't think strategically about building wealth next year. Your mental bandwidth is entirely occupied with immediate threats, which makes it almost impossible to develop the habits and mindset needed to climb out. The psychological research on this is fascinating and depressing. People in financial stress show measurable decreases in cognitive function, decision-making ability, and impulse control. It's not that poor people are bad with money, it's that financial stress literally impairs your ability to think clearly about money. You're operating in crisis mode, which makes long-term planning feel like a luxury you can't afford. The breakthrough happens when you realize that the goal isn't to earn your way out of level 1, it's to save your way out. Even setting aside $25 per month proves to your brain that you can control money instead of letting it control you. That small action starts rewiring your relationship with finances and creates the foundation for everything that comes next. I know someone who spent 3 years at level 1 constantly stressed about money, always behind on bills, making financial decisions based on fear rather than logic. The turning point wasn't a raise or a windfall. It was the decision to automatically transfer $50 every payday to a separate savings account. After 6 months, they had $300 saved, which felt like a fortune compared to the usual zero. That $300 didn't solve their financial problems, but it solved their financial panic. Suddenly, minor emergencies became inconveniences rather than disasters. That psychological shift created the mental space needed to start thinking strategically about money instead of just reactively. Level 2 is what I call breathing room, and this is where the majority of Americans spend their entire financial lives. You've got a small emergency fund, maybe $1,000 to $5,000 saved up. You can handle minor car repairs without panicking. You're not worried about making rent this month, but you're still not thinking much beyond the next few months. You know you're at level 2 when you can afford most things you need, but still have to think carefully about anything you want. Here's the psychological trap that keeps people stuck at level 2 for decades, and it's not what you'd expect. The problem isn't lack of income or even lack of savings. The problem is that level 2 feels comfortable enough that people lose the urgency to keep climbing. You're not in crisis anymore, so the motivation to make dramatic changes disappears. You can afford your lifestyle, you're making progress on your emergency fund, and everything feels manageable, but manageable becomes the enemy of exceptional. People at level 2 often develop what I call comfortable complacency. They'll stay in jobs they don't love because the pay is decent. They'll rent apartments they can afford instead of strategizing about homeownership. They'll drive reliable cars instead of thinking about how transportation costs are affecting their net worth. Level 2 feels like success compared to level 1, but it's actually a comfortable prison that prevents most people from ever building real wealth. Think about someone making $50,000 per year with $3,000 in savings. They feel financially stable compared to their broke college days. They can afford their apartment, their car payment, their student loans, and still have money left over for occasional dinners out and maybe a vacation once a year. Life is good. The stress is gone. But here's what's actually happening behind the scenes. That $50,000 salary, after taxes, retirement contributions, and basic expenses, leaves maybe $200 per month for savings if they're being disciplined. At that rate, it would take them over 4 years to save $10,000, and that's assuming no major setbacks or lifestyle inflation. Meanwhile, they're watching their friends buy houses, take expensive trips, and seemingly live better lives. The temptation to spend that $200 on lifestyle improvements rather than savings becomes overwhelming. They upgrade their car, move to a nicer apartment, or start eating out more frequently. Suddenly, that $200 savings cushion disappears, and they're stuck at level 2 indefinitely. The breakthrough to level 3 requires a fundamental mindset shift. Instead of asking, "Can I afford this?" you start asking, "Is this moving me toward financial freedom or away from it?" Instead of optimizing for comfort, you start optimizing for growth. This often means making choices that feel like sacrifices in the short term but create exponential benefits in the long term. Level 3 is what I call foundation building. This is where you've accumulated $10,000 to $50,000 in savings and investments. You're not just surviving or maintaining anymore, you're actively building wealth. You've probably automated your savings, you understand the basics of investing, and you're thinking in terms of years instead of months. You know you're at level 3 when unexpected expenses feel like inconveniences rather than disasters, and you're starting to see your money generate its own money through investment returns. But here's what's fascinating about level 3 that most people don't realize until they experience it themselves. The biggest change isn't the amount of money you have, it's how your brain starts processing opportunities and risks. When you're at level 1 or 2, every financial decision is filtered through scarcity and fear. But at level 3, you finally have enough breathing room to think strategically about growth. Maybe your coworker mentions a side business opportunity that requires a $2,000 upfront investment. At level 2, that's immediately off the table because $2,000 represents a huge portion of your emergency fund. But at level 3, you can actually evaluate the opportunity on its merits. Maybe that certification program could boost your salary by $10,000 annually. Maybe that side hustle could generate passive income. You're not saying yes to everything, but you're finally able to say yes to the right things. I watched this transformation happen with a friend who reached level 3 after years of disciplined saving. She'd been working in marketing for $55,000 per year, consistently saving $400 per month until she had about $15,000 in various accounts. Then her company offered to pay for a digital marketing certification that cost $3,000 upfront, but she'd have to cover it herself and get reimbursed later. At level 2, this would have been impossible. She couldn't afford to float $3,000 even temporarily. But at level 3, she could cover the cost and wait for reimbursement. 6 months later, she used that certification to land a new job paying $75,000. That single opportunity, which was only possible because she had level 3 financial stability, increased her annual income by $20,000. The psychological shift is enormous. You stop thinking like someone who's trying to protect what little they have and start thinking like someone who's building something bigger. Risk tolerance increases, time horizon extends, and opportunities that were previously invisible suddenly become obvious. The mathematics of level 3 are also where things start getting interesting. Let's say you're saving $500 per month and earning 7% annually on your investments. At this level, your existing investments are starting to contribute meaningful amounts to your wealth building. If you have $25,000 invested, that's generating about $1,750 per year in returns. Combined with your $6,000 in annual contributions, you're adding $7,750 to your net worth annually, and $1,750 of that happened automatically while you were sleeping. Level 4 is where things get really interesting. I call this momentum building, and it typically happens when you've accumulated $100,000 to $500,000 in net worth. You're no longer just building wealth. You're starting to see wealth build itself through compound interest and investment returns. Your monthly investment gains might exceed what you used to save in an entire year. You know you're at level 4 when your money starts working harder than you do. Here's the mind-bending realization that hits people when they reach level 4. The same amount of effort that got you from level 1 to level 3 will now get you much further, much faster. If you were saving $1,000 per month to build your foundation, that same $1,000 monthly contribution now has a $300,000 investment portfolio working alongside it. Let's say you're earning 8% annually on your investments. That means your existing portfolio is generating $24,000 per year in returns. Combined with your $12,000 in annual contributions, you're adding $36,000 to your net worth annually. But here's what's crazy. $24,000 of that happened while you were sleeping. Your money literally worked harder than most people's part-time jobs. This is when people start to understand what wealthy people mean when they say money goes to money. It's not some conspiracy where the universe favors rich people. It's basic mathematics. The more money you have working for you, the harder it's possible for your money to work. Level 4 is where you finally have enough capital for compound interest to become a meaningful force in your wealth building, rather than just a nice theoretical concept. But level 4 also presents new psychological challenges that catch many people off guard. When your net worth starts fluctuating by thousands of dollars per month based on market movements, it can be emotionally overwhelming. I know someone who reached $200,000 in investments and became obsessed with checking their account balance multiple times per day. They'd feel euphoric when the market was up and depressed when it was down, even though they had no plans to sell anything for decades. This emotional volatility can lead to terrible decision-making, like selling during market downturns or constantly tinkering with investment strategies. The people who successfully navigate level 4 learn to focus on their savings rate and time horizon rather than daily market movements. They understand that volatility is the price you pay for long-term growth, and that trying to time the market usually reduces returns rather than improving them. Level 5 is what I call flexibility and freedom. This typically happens when your net worth reaches $500,000 to $2 million. You're approaching or have achieved what many financial advisors call coast financial independence, meaning if you stop saving today and just let your existing investments grow, you'd still have a comfortable retirement. You know you're at level 5 when work becomes optional rather than necessary, even if you're not ready to retire yet. But here's the psychological transformation that happens at level 5 that changes everything about how you approach life decisions. When work becomes optional, your relationship with your career fundamentally changes. You're no longer negotiating from a position of desperation. You can afford to walk away from bad situations, bad bosses, and bad opportunities. This confidence often leads to better career outcomes, higher compensation, and more interesting work. I know someone who reached level 5 and immediately became the most valuable employee at their company, not because their skills improved overnight, but because their entire demeanor changed. They started speaking up in meetings, pushing back on unrealistic deadlines, and proposing innovative solutions. Their boss assumed they'd gotten another job offer and proactively offered them a promotion and a 30% raise. They hadn't changed their behavior to get a raise. They'd changed their behavior because they didn't need the job anymore. The raise was just a natural consequence. This is the paradox of financial freedom. The less you need money, the more money tends to flow toward you. When you're not desperate, you make better decisions. When you're not scared, you take smarter risks. When you're not trapped, you find better opportunities. Level 5 is also where people start making different choices about how they spend their time and energy. Maybe they finally pursue that creative project they've been putting off. Maybe they start a business doing something they're passionate about, without worrying about whether it will be immediately profitable. Maybe they take on volunteer work or spend more time with family. The common thread is that financial considerations stop dominating life decisions. But there's an interesting psychological adjustment that happens at level 5 that many people don't anticipate. After years of focusing intensely on wealth building, suddenly having enough can create an identity crisis. If you've defined yourself as someone who's climbing toward financial independence, what happens when you arrive? Some people experience what researchers call arrival syndrome, a sense of emptiness or lack of purpose once they've achieved their major financial goals. The people who navigate this successfully realize that financial independence isn't an end goal, it's a tool that enables other goals. Money stops being the focus and starts being the foundation that supports whatever they actually want to accomplish with their lives. Level 6 is what I call true independence. Your net worth is typically $2 million to $10 million, and you've achieved what's known as full financial independence. Your investment income covers all of your expenses, meaning work is now completely optional. You could retire today and maintain your current lifestyle indefinitely. You know you're at level 6 when you realize you never have to do anything for money ever again. Here's what's strange about level 6 that surprises most people who achieve it. You don't feel dramatically different day to day. You don't wake up feeling like a millionaire or walking around in a state of constant celebration. The practical reality is that your life looks remarkably similar to how it looked at level 5, except now you have ultimate flexibility in how you spend your time. But the psychological relief is profound in ways that are hard to explain to someone who hasn't experienced it. Every stress in your life that was connected to money simply evaporates. You're not worried about losing your job because you don't need your job. You're not stressed about market crashes because you have decades of expenses covered even if everything goes to zero. You're not concerned about inflation because your wealth is growing faster than prices. The most interesting thing that happens at level 6 is that money completely changes from being a goal to being a tool. Instead of trying to accumulate wealth, you start thinking about what you want to accomplish with that wealth. Some people start businesses they're passionate about without worrying about profitability. Others focus on philanthropy or family or creative pursuits. The common thread is that financial considerations disappear from decision-making, which paradoxically often leads to even more wealth generation. I know a couple who reached level 6 in their early 50s and decided to spend 2 years traveling the world with their kids before the children went to college. They weren't worried about the cost or the impact on their careers because their investments were generating more than enough to cover their expenses regardless of what they did. That freedom to make decisions based purely on what would create the best life experience rather than what would create the best financial outcome is the real luxury that level 6 provides. Level 7 is what I call legacy and impact. Your net worth exceeds $10 million, and you're operating in the realm of generational wealth and significant societal influence. You're not just financially independent, you have the resources to impact entire communities, fund research, start movements, or build institutions. You know you're at level 7 when your financial decisions are driven by purpose rather than personal benefit. Here's what's fascinating about people who reach level 7. They often stop thinking about personal wealth accumulation entirely and start focusing on how to use their resources to create lasting impact. Warren Buffett has pledged to give away 99% of his wealth. Bill Gates left Microsoft to focus on global health and education. These aren't just acts of generosity. They're the natural evolution of how someone thinks about money when they have more than they could possibly spend. But perhaps the most surprising thing about level 7 is that many people who achieve it report feeling the same fundamental happiness and life satisfaction as people at level 5 or 6. Having $50 million doesn't make you 5 times happier than having $10 million. The psychological benefits of wealth plateau somewhere around level 5 or 6, and everything beyond that is about impact rather than personal satisfaction. This reveals something important about wealth psychology that most people miss. The goal isn't to reach level 7 because you think it will make you happier. The goal is to reach the level where money stops being a source of stress and limitation in your life. For some people, that might be level 4. For others, it might be level 6. The specific number matters less than achieving the psychological freedom that comes with financial security. At level 7, people often become focused on solving problems that can't be solved with individual action. They fund research into diseases, support educational initiatives, or create foundations that will outlive them. The scale of their thinking expands from personal financial security to societal impact. Money becomes a way to multiply their ability to influence positive change in the world. Now let's talk about why most people get stuck at level 2 and never break through to the higher levels. It's not because they don't earn enough money or because they're not smart enough to understand investing. The real barrier is psychological, and it's surprisingly subtle. Level 2 feels like success because it solves your immediate financial stress. You can pay your bills, handle minor emergencies, and afford most things you need. Your brain interprets this as mission accomplished and shifts focus to other areas of life. You stop obsessing about money because money is no longer your primary source of stress. But this psychological relief actually becomes the trap that prevents further progress. Building wealth requires sustained focus and intentional decision-making over many years. It requires saying no to things you can afford in order to say yes to things you want in the future. It requires thinking beyond immediate comfort and optimizing for long-term growth. People stuck at level 2 often develop what I call lifestyle inflation syndrome. As their income increases, their spending increases proportionally, keeping them at the same relative level of financial security. They upgrade their apartment, buy a nicer car, eat at better restaurants, and take more expensive vacations. Their life gets more comfortable, but their net worth doesn't grow proportionally. The breakthrough happens when you realize that the goal isn't to afford a better lifestyle, it's to afford financial freedom. Instead of asking, how can I spend this raise? You start asking, how can I save and invest this raise? Instead of upgrading your lifestyle every time your income increases, you upgrade your savings rate. Here's a practical example of how this plays out. Let's say someone gets a $10,000 raise. The level 2 mindset says, great, now I can afford a nicer apartment, or finally I can get that car I've been wanting. The level 3 plus mindset says, great, now I can increase my investment contributions by $10,000 per year. Both approaches improve the person's life, but only one improves their financial trajectory. The person who spends the raise feels better immediately, but stays at the same level of financial security. The person who invests the raise doesn't see immediate lifestyle improvements, but they accelerate their timeline to financial independence by years or even decades. After 10 years, the first person has a nicer lifestyle, but the same net worth. The second person has the same lifestyle but enough wealth to buy financial freedom. Here's a framework that might help you think about climbing from your current level to the next one. First, identify where you currently sit. Be honest about your net worth, your monthly expenses, and your psychological relationship with money. Are you stressed about unexpected expenses? Are you optimizing for comfort or growth? Do you think about money daily or only when making major decisions? Next, understand that each level requires a different strategy. Level 1 to level 2 is about developing basic financial discipline and building a small emergency fund. Level 2 to level 3 is about increasing your savings rate and starting to invest consistently. Level 3 to level 4 is about optimizing your investment strategy and increasing your income. Level 4 to level 5 is about staying the course and letting compound interest work its magic. Level 5 and beyond is about optimizing for purpose rather than accumulation. The most important thing to understand is that the strategies that work at one level often don't work at the next level. You can't save your way from level 1 to level 6. At some point, you need to focus on increasing your income, optimizing your investments, and thinking strategically about major financial decisions like home ownership, career changes, and business ownership. Let me give you some specific actions for each transition. Moving from level 1 to level 2 requires aggressive expense cutting and establishing the habit of saving something every month, even if it's just $25. Moving from level 2 to level 3 requires increasing your savings rate to at least 15 to 20% of your income and starting to invest in diversified index funds. Moving from level 3 to level 4 requires focusing on income optimization through career advancement, side hustles, or business ownership while maintaining high savings rates. Moving from level 4 to level 5 is largely about patience and staying the course. The mathematics of compound interest will do most of the work for you, but you need to resist the temptation to make dramatic changes or time the market. Moving from level 5 to level 6 again requires patience, but also might involve optimizing for tax efficiency and potentially exploring more sophisticated investment strategies. But perhaps the most crucial insight is that wealth building is fundamentally about mindset more than mathematics. Every level requires you to think differently about money, risk, time, and opportunity. The specific tactics matter, but the psychological foundation is what determines whether those tactics will actually be implemented consistently over the years required to build real wealth. The person who stays at level 2 for decades and the person who climbs to level 5 or 6 often have access to the same information, the same opportunities, and similar earning potential. The difference is that one person develops the mindset of a wealth builder, while the other person develops the mindset of a comfortable consumer. The wealth builder thinks in terms of decades and optimizes for long-term financial freedom. The comfortable consumer thinks in terms of months and optimizes for immediate lifestyle satisfaction. Both approaches are valid, but they lead to completely different outcomes over time. So here's my challenge for you. Figure out which level you're currently at and be honest about what's keeping you there. Is it lack of income, lack of financial knowledge, or lack of psychological commitment to building wealth rather than building lifestyle? Then identify one specific change you can make this month that moves you toward the next level. Not a dramatic overhaul of your entire financial life, but one concrete step that proves to yourself that you're serious about climbing rather than staying comfortable where you are. The beautiful thing about this framework is that it gives you a roadmap rather than just a destination. You don't have to figure out how to get from level 2 to level 6 all at once. You just have to figure out how to get from level 2 to level 3. And once you've made that transition, the path to level 4 becomes much clearer. Remember, wealth building isn't about depriving yourself of things you enjoy or living like a monk until you're 65. It's about making intentional choices about where your money goes so that eventually your money gives you complete control over where your time goes. That's the real prize. Not a bigger house or a fancier car, but the freedom to spend your life exactly how you want to spend it. Whether that's working on projects you're passionate about, traveling the world, or simply having the security of knowing that money will never again be a source of stress or limitation in your life. The choice is yours, but the clock is ticking, and every month you stay comfortable at your current level is a month that compound interest isn't working as hard as it could be on your behalf.